Today, we've got an excellent opportunity just to deal with the idea of crisis in your community, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that's a scary proposition, but that's truly the situation we're in today. And I'm totally excited to have Jerry Majors with us. Everybody just calls him Mage, and he has been in youth ministry circles since time began. Back, I think about 30 plus years, about the same time I started youth ministry. Oh, yeah. But with that, it's the idea that Jerry here has done a lot with Youth for Christ. He has worked with the crisis incident response team that we've had in the past with National Network of Youth Ministries. The idea of how to be aware and prepared for crisis before it happens. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say, because I need what knowledge and wisdom he has when I look at the networks that I deal with here in Utah. So Jerry, let me go ahead and pray for you, and we'll start into this.
Cool.
Jesus, thank you for Jerry. Thank you that you have prepared him. You have been with him. You care about him. Thank you, God, that he abides in you, and he has been prepared for crisis by you. And God, as he shares his wisdom, his words with us, help us, Lord, just to see what our next steps are in when it comes to crisis, how we can unite youth leaders in our communities together to prepare for crisis before it happens, and then to be a support for one another when it does. Amen.
Thank you very much. I'll just give you a little bit of an introduction as far as the crisis stuff goes. And Doug, you're welcome to chime in here. And I think I might even have a question for you just to clarify something. But I'll just tell you how I got into really just doing a lot with the crisis stuff. And it was more of being thrown into the frying pan. I graduated from college in '86 and went right into the youth director at the church I grew up in. And I don't think I was there a year before we were dealing with a suicide of a kid at the local high school and kids that knew him. And so that was the first thing that we had gotten, where you're like, okay, I need to talk to these kids on a deeper level. We can't have youth group tonight. We got to deal with this. And I remember getting a book or two here and there about just trying to do all that. Well, when I had worked in church youth ministry for a while, then I started building the chapter of Youth for Christ around 94, 95. And we had several different incidents with our, of the youth pastors in our network, which we started. Me and another youth pastor in the area started a network, and we got a lot of different guys involved. And at that point, most of us were full-time or almost. And then it was like things just started happening. There was, and I don't remember the order of things from way back then, but there was a couple car accidents that took kids' lives, a couple suicides, and then one of the big events was the guy that was helping me do the Youth Workers Network at the time. There was a murder at the Wendy's about 2 blocks from his church. And so we started saying, hey, we need to do something. So I kind of put the structure together. He put the teaching stuff together. Right now he's a vice president of education at a college, Christian college. That was his area. So he started putting the work together and what we were going to try to teach. And we started doing classes for our Youth Workers Network. So we did a couple classes, and then along the line, after Columbine, Doug Clark actually got in touch with us and talked about we're one of the few, or maybe one of the only ones, that was doing any type of training for crisis response ahead of the time, ahead of an event, so youth workers were prepared. So that's how I got connected to the National Network Task Force for the crisis response. And in those, and Doug, this is what was the late 90s we started working on that, or early 2000s, I guess, to put help when it hurts together.
Right, that was after Columbine, so
Would have been after
dates are a
99.
little fuzzy in my head right now, but and it was after 9/11 because two of the guys had done chaplaincy literally at the site of the bombing in New York.
Yep, that's right, because we used a couple of those slides. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, we got in touch, started doing a lot of that preparation, came up with the program. So let's morph now into what's called Aware and Prepared, and that is on the website. And I think it's still on the chat, correct? It's if you back up to all the way to the beginning of the chat, Kevin posted nnym.org/crisis. And then the other one, youthworkers.net/crisis response. And you can get the one pagers. And I'm just going to give you a few of the an overview of that paper, because that was designed to be something we would want to get in every youth worker's hands. So it's just some basic stuff for if you are dealing with kids in crisis and you are going to help them to be able to deal with it. And then the second stage of what we designed was to prepare your network. And that was do a little bit of training, and you can put that training together. We have some training stuff that we've done, and I've taught it in numerous places in preparing your network. And so it was understanding, what's happening in the community, what happens with the media, what happens with, what's going to go on in the school. And I've been very fortunate to have one of our local principals who dealt with 4 different car accidents, 4 in a row, who took kids' lives. And one year there was a kid in a white car. Second year was 2 kids in a white car. Third year was 3 kids in a white car. And so then it was, everybody was like, don't travel 4 kids in a white car. It's just because that's how much he was dealing with it. So he comes in and teaches about an hour on the schools, what the school has to go through, and kind of helped our youth workers understand, hey, this is stuff you need to be aware of on the school's behalf. So anyway, on this sheet, on the Aware and Prepared sheet, one of the key things is understanding pre-existing relationships. And so if I were to say something to you to challenge you to say, if we're going to be ready, whether it's you or your network, to handle something or to be an assistance to a school, it's going to be based on your pre-existing relationships. If you don't know the principal, he's not going to have you help out. If you know the principal and you know his secretary, because she's the gatekeeper to the principal and the principal's the gatekeeper to the school, if you don't know the principal or someone there, it'll be really difficult for them to trust you that you are coming in a way to help rather than just try to proselytize. One of the things that I think, and Doug would attest to this, that Rob Mitchell, who really drilled into us, was we don't need a conversion during that time to validate your work with kids and serving the community. God may open that door, and that'll be incredible to watch. And I can give an example where one of my board members right now got saved at the school that I told you about, where 2 kids were killed in the white car. And because she started asking questions to her friend. Okay, so it can happen, but we're not there to push that. We're there to serve the school and the community, and especially those teenagers. And so we're there to be God's presence in the school. If you have pre-existing relationships with kids in the school, that gives you more credibility with the principal as well, because he knows you already have a pre-existing relationship with those kids. And the mental health community is, and even this is 15 years ago when we were doing this, the mental health community is understanding the role of the faith community in helping kids be able to come back to normal. That's a person they're familiar with. It's a person they know. It's a person they can already trust. And so they go to them. And that was part of what was found at Columbine, where kids were going to the youth pastors rather than the school provided mental health counselors. So being ready as an individual is important. Already ministering to a school is important. And now I'll do the shameless plug for campus evangelism. Okay. If there's 30 kids in your youth group and you're satisfied, my question for you is, yeah, you might be happy about that. But if there's 1,000 kids in the school down the street, who's their youth pastor? Okay. So that's my challenge to you to well. The next piece of what's on the that little handout thing is things that you're going to do. And so this is the practical tips that are on this. And like I said, if you missed it before, this aware and prepare sheet at nnym.org/crisis. This gives you some things that we want in the hands of every youth worker. And that is listen without judgment, listen with intent, do active listening, repeat back what they're saying, just let kids talk. Be available. They come and need you at any time. Understand what kids are going through. One of the things that I mentioned before, I water ski with a surgeon in our area, and I just happened to mention we do the crisis response. And 2 days later, he texted me and said, my daughter's best friend was just killed in a car accident. I've got 30 teenagers in my basement. I need you to come over and talk to them. And so those are the opportunities that just come because you're prepared. The other thing too, on the back, I think it's on the back. I keep it as a one pager, but on the very back says community connection, wait your turn. This is in response to what one of you were saying about when people come in, it's like everybody, it's like, feeding frenzy at the fish park. If you've got people coming in like that, I tell you, the administrations are going to say hands off, so respect the chain of command. If you are actually coming into a crisis, you are stepping in where there is a crisis, you need to understand who the chain of command is. Usually any officer would know, any uniformed officer would know, but also too, it has to do, and there is a chain of command, and it has to do with rank, but it also has to do with who was there first. So if you happen to be so privileged to, like one of you said, you were at the school when the lockdown happened, part of that is understanding who's in charge in that spot. If you're in that crisis place, stay out of restricted areas. That's one. Respect the privacy. If there are victims, don't push yourself into things to kind of insert yourself into that. And then be alert for changing and emerging stress-related needs. One of the things I think that we forget about that is very important is helping those that are doing the helping. So whether it's the paid people and the trained people that are doing the helping that you can serve by getting water or food or whatever, but it's also the school. Part of helping at the school is understanding the needs that the principal and the teachers and the guidance counselors are having, and the relief that they're going to need. And I would caution, but the way your school administrators will tell you this, is how much you can offer like prayer for someone. Obviously, you can always pray, but do you automatically say that to the principal? Well, this principal who went through on the year that the third accident happened with 3 kids in the white car, I knew him well enough and I knew his background well enough, though I don't know that he was a believer, he would be receptive to me praying for him. And so I did. In his office, I prayed with him and one of the fathers who I happen to know. So like, you have to make that judgment call based on your relationship with them. But I would say definitely you have to remember that we are there to minister and to give that unique role in the kids' lives as well as the school staff. But you have to be very, very careful with what you can and can't do. I'll give this little bit. If you're looking at that sheet, or if you have it, split screen or something, the section where it says watch your words, that is practical down the line, you need to know. And that's why it's on this sheet. Okay. There are stupid things that Christians say in crisis. Okay. So some of the ones that are listed there, if you are talking with a kid and their friend was just killed or their friend was just committed suicide, and you say, "Oh, I know how you feel." If you don't say it, unless you've lost your best friend at their age, or you've lost, a dad like they did, or whatever you're helping them through, don't say it. The other one is be happy. It could have been worse. That just says you're minimizing their pain. And obviously that's not going to be helpful. And then you must be strong for your family, your sister, your siblings, your classmates. You got to be strong. Even if it's Christian kids, you need to be a strong Christian kid in this. They have to grieve too, and they have to go through that process. Or, the famous one, well, they're in a better place now. That's no consolation. Okay. And it's also, you can't guarantee that. You got to be very careful with saying that. Okay. Unless you know for sure, for whatever reason in that accident or whatever, they were a believer, you can't say that at all, because it provides no comfort. Okay. Because no, I need them here. Or you'll feel better when, time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. It just covers them over. Okay. We should all know that by now at our ages. Time doesn't heal the wounds. I heard a phrase several years back that I incorporated in our training, and it's, you never get over the loss of a friend. You do get on. Okay. You do move on, but you never get over. Okay. And then the pull yourself together one, I think that goes without saying. That's just stupid. But some of the things that you can say, okay, I'm here to help you in any way that I can. And I think one of the best ones is I'll be praying for you. I'll be praying for others. And the best one is in the kind of like little ways down in that paragraph. And we really try to impress this upon the people that we're training. I really don't understand this either, but I do know I can still trust God. And if I were to give you one statement to leave with you, to kind of have a mindset of helping people, it would be that one. I don't understand this either, but I do know we can still trust God. One of the other phrases that we often encourage is the next one. Sometimes there are no easy answers, but there are people around who care for you, and it'd be best if you could let them care for you or let them help you. That's a big one too. So that gives you some, a couple things. If you were to prepare your network, and this is on the page where it says building your relationships before the day of crisis, on the top, it's getting to know the people in your school, and that changes. So just because you knew the principal 4 years ago, it doesn't mean that principal is still there. If you guys have been working on campuses or with schools, you understand that they change, and there arose in North Pocono a principal that knew not Mage. So things change. So, and then also there's a spot there to list other people. So emergency responders, government people that might be helpful. And then your youth ministry network coordinator. So whoever the coordinator is for youth group. And I'll mention more about that in a second. But then if you need to refer out to chaplains or counselors or, a suicide prevention group or whatever, have some of those numbers available too. The last thing I'll do, and I don't want to go much, I don't know where my time's at, so I bet it's 24, so I know I should be quitting pretty soon. So let me just throw this last piece in. If like what we did was when we did our training, and then when we got involved in the network, we did a little bit more structured training. And I took a little bit more classes to be able to teach a little bit more knowledgeable. But once we had a group of guys and girls, there was a lot of women in it too, that were prepared to be able to help out if something were to happen. When something happened at a school, I, as the network coordinator, was the point of contact, but then I would call the youth worker that I knew that was at that school. And then I would either help them if I knew the principal or whatever, then I would help them to get into the school, or to go, to make sure that they're at something where students were going to be or whatever. And so the network coordinator can be that hub of a person when something happens, that you know who to recommend in that district, in that school district. So in our area here, we don't have countywide schools. Each community has their own school and school board and everything else. So they're all independent. So when we have churches in those areas, or we know a church, a larger church might have more kids at that school, then I know, who to recommend to go to those schools. But those relationships have to keep continuing to grow, because if your youth workers, they transition often as much as principals do. So it's hard to keep track of everybody in your network. Just a word of experience there. To give you an example, there was a principal or a school in one area that had a kid killed in a quad accident. And so there was a suicide. There was a suicide at a school first, in one school district where this assistant principal was. And 2 of the youth workers in our network went in and said, we're just here to be able to help out. And she said, I would just love for you to walk the halls, go into the lunch period, take the time. Now, we don't have access to schools like in some areas. So this was incredible open door. They just spent the whole day walking the halls and in lunch period, talking with kids, talking them through what was going on. That assistant principal moved as an assistant principal to another school district. And that's where a kid was killed in a quad. And so it was just the next school district over. So the same 2 youth workers went to that assistant. She said, oh yeah, come on in. We just need you to be here. When the principal found out, it was like all hell broke loose. And she came over to them, like running to them, and said, you can't be here. You can go out. You can go to the Memorial soccer game on Friday night, which is for everybody. And that was the kibosh on that. So it really depends on your relationships with certain principals in those areas. And if your school system structure is a little bit more like countywide schools, that might give you greater access, it might give you less. So one of the things that you're going to talk about in your discussion is, what are you going to do to get started? And one of the suggestions is make sure everybody's got that sheet. Now, I printed mine in yellow, but make sure all of your youth workers have the sheet that just gives you some of that, very basic information.
So, Mage, first of all, thank you. And that's so good. And since Doug's on here, and I know you guys have worked together on this sheet, it's so good to know that somebody's already down the road and that we have that sheet available. So, just thank you. And I think Phil will put some questions in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll go out into some chat rooms for about 15 minutes. And talk about what we've learned and what we heard, because somebody said that I'm not the smartest person in the room, and there's a lot of smart people on this call, but none of us are as smart as all of us. So let's take the next 10, 15 minutes to learn from each other, and then we'll get back together and somebody share what you guys talked about. So sound good?
Feel free to pause the video here and think through these questions yourself, or with the group that you're viewing this with. When you're ready, unpause to hear more of the conversation and the takeaways from the youth workers that joined us live.
Okay, well, that was a phenomenal conversation in our group. So we want to learn from each other. So what would you talk about? What did you process? What do we need to hear that was shared in your group that might help all of us? And then Mage is still on here, but he's on his iPhone. So if you have a question for Mage, or I'm picking on Doug Clark because those guys have worked on this. But some thoughts. I think our initial one is we're all copying what we just saw and we're taking it to our networks and we're having a conversation. I think that was initially, and then the other one was if we're over an area, is beyond what Mage and Doug put in there about counselors and all that, is who in my community has the best relationship with that principal and that secretary in that school. So if there is a crisis on that campus, that can be our first call after we get the word.
Mhm.
But other thoughts?
I want to hear from Jeremiah, because you had a great idea that you've already been implementing in your network and need to work on some more.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about is just having a regular time of crisis training for youth workers within our network, so that it's something that's scheduled, can be on the calendar, and maybe not too close together, so that people don't feel like been there, done that. But with the turnover in youth ministry, youth workers, it's good to keep that as a regular calendar thing. That was something I was expressing as a need for us, because I think it's been 4 or 5 years since we've done a crisis training in our network.
Jeremiah, did you have someone local lead that, or did you lead it, or how did you guys do that?
Yeah, we did as our staff at YFC led that, but it was only because we had a bunch of great materials. I think some of the materials we actually had were floating around from National Network stuff that we'd received in the past. But it was, from what I remember, it was pretty thorough as far as conversations, the right things to say and the wrong things to say. Being able to have people kind of on call and connected, so that they're aware that, hey, you're on this list of people to call if so you want to make sure that you're available and present. One of the cool things, I'll just mention this too, I didn't think about this in our group, but when we did respond to one of the major crises we had at one of the high schools, they had set up 2 rooms. I don't know why they did this, 2 rooms where they had youth workers in one room. Some of them were people that had been on campus at that high school. And the other room was like school counselors and people they had called in from behavioral health. And we ended up having just about every student go to the room with the youth workers, and no one went over to the behavioral health. So eventually the behavioral health counselors came over to our room as well. But it was just kind of, I think it spoke a lot to how just our footprint in the community and with that school. So I think kids, when they're really hurting and it comes to those kinds of conversations, they want to hear from someone who's going to give them hope.
That's good. Dottie, I want to hear from you, because I know you've done a little bit of this work on your schools and with your networks.
I'm not doing as much with my network as I would like to, and I've encouraged to pass out this crisis response thing. And I think that it's not crisis response, but it's aware. And, I told my group, I had done a critical incident response training in 2003. I'd been well assured that I was now prepared for a school shooting, which was kind of one of my goals at that time. It's hard for me to believe that I truly believed after 2 days training I was prepared, but okay, they told me I was. And so, I went down when there was a shooting at Santa Fe, and I learned all kinds of things, and I really stayed out of the way, and, I behaved appropriately. But, and then the next thing I did is I encouraged a lot of the local youth pastors to take those trainings as well, thinking we would be welcome to be a part of a critical response team. And I could see the value when I was down there of the team and people having a role and knowing what role. And the other thing I noticed when I went to that is that the chaplains, the religious community, was pretty disorganized in my area and underrepresented. And I wasn't a great having never given a death notice or watched one given, I really wasn't prepared to do that either. But I could see it was an incredible need and an incredible opportunity. And how do we train well to be prepared for that? And Okay. And I do think the training is critical, but anyways, to me, the critical incident response team, I think that's great training. And I told people, K-Love, it's a local radio station. They do it for first responders all over. And if you get an opportunity to take it, I think it's well worth your time. Great techniques, great. Anyways, okay. Is that helpful? Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, in honor of our time, Doug, you've been involved in this a little bit. What I heard Mage saying is y'all were working on some stuff before Columbine, so it was already ready when that happened. So any added thoughts, Doug? And then Mage, if there's anything that you want to say, and then we'll stay on here so we're not running off, but we want to honor everybody's time.
Yeah, I think there was actually a blog post a little while back on our website that just mentioned how important it is to take a long view in building relationships. We want to be in a hurry and we want to help, but you don't have the right, or you haven't won the right to be heard and to be welcome at the table unless you've invested time. And really with that first question, you may be asking them, what can I do to help you? You may come in with an agenda of, I want to help in a crisis, but that might not be their agenda and they might not respond to that. So to be able to start with, what can I do to serve you? How can our network just help you make your job easier? They may give you a job that seems really mundane and very off kilter, but every step you build of trust is going to get you closer to being in the place. My favorite story of all the ones that we heard as we were putting together the training a while back was from Ron Sauer. The school the school's name is slipping my mind, but in Oregon, somebody will come up with it. There was a school shooting, and he had invested so much time as a Young Life leader in building relationships on the campus that he was there, came to the principal, and the principal said, trusted him enough, said, the parents are all in the gym over there, go take it.
Wow.
Carte blanche, maybe the most volatile group that he possibly could have been given. He had the trust build to go in and just handle talking to the parents. And I just love that because he won the right to be heard. And so take the long view and come in as a servant. There's an awful lot of rancor. There's an awful lot of conflict that principals have to deal with, administrators dealing with right now. And a lot of it, you can just make their life easier by coming alongside as a servant. So,
so good. Mage, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I can say this. I'm going to turn off the road here just a second, but yeah, in response to what Doug just shared there, I remember us talking way back when, in the days of Little House on the Prairie, the parson, the pastor, was probably one of the smartest people in the town because he had an education, and that's no longer the case. We don't automatically have that right to be heard, and so it does need to be earned a lot more than sometimes we're patient for. Second, what Doug has said. I think part of it, somebody in our group said the beginning conversation should be, and I'll just reiterate this because I thought it was great, and I can't remember exactly who said it now, but it said, maybe we haven't dealt with a suicide or car accident before, but what are some of the potential things we might have to deal with in the future, and to get your network thinking in that direction. That was a great thought. So, but thanks you guys very much. I appreciated just sharing from our our experience, some of the things God's taught us.
Yeah, I heard somebody say one time, don't make life a blind alley for the next generation to walk down. So thanks for all the work that's been done. And Kevin, I'm gonna let you wrap it up and then we'll stay on here.
I am so thankful for Mage and what he shared with us today. I have a lot to put into practice in my local network here in St. George. With that, we have great opportunities still for the next conversation coming up. We are going to have in December, we're going to, Mike DeVito will be sharing with us the idea of soul care for busy youth workers. And if you're a busy youth worker, you can raise your hand because that's me. And along those lines, he's just going to give some practical tips of saying, hey, how do you enjoy the season, the holiday season, Christmas? How do you be the youth worker that's in touch with God while you're doing all the busyness around you? I'm excited to hear Mike DeVito come on. That'll be December 13th. I'm putting the Eventbrite into the chat right now for that. We've also got free refills, kind of a regular soul care type of podcast we do every month. And Jerry Major was on for us this time. So you can take a look at that. We'll have a follow-up, get information along those lines, but free refills is the name of it. And then as well, I'll be sending up a follow-up email with information, some resources for you talking about what we had today. And we have a kind of discussion guides and that kind of stuff that we do as a network here. So that helps your local network where you're at. So along those lines, let me just go ahead and pray for us right now. So I'm thankful for the time that we have together. God, help us when it comes to crisis to trust you, to be prepared, to have our networks be prepared. Because it's not a matter of if the next crisis happens, it's a matter of when. But God, you know, we need your resources, we need your help, and just prepare us so that we can be there for hurting people and show us best how to lead through crisis. Amen.
Thanks for viewing this network conversation, brought to you by the National Network of Youth Ministries. We hope it helps you to set the table for unity and further conversations with other youth leaders. Any shared links are in the comment section on NNYM's YouTube channel. While you're there, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to join our next conversation or training, you can find upcoming live events on our Eventbrite page. You can also connect to a local network leader at nnym.org. We're here because we are better together.